Most people think they know how to pray. They recite words, repeat phrases, whisper requests into the air. But what if Jesus revealed that most people are doing it wrong? What if, in your most desperate moments, when you thought you were reaching heaven, you were actually speaking into silence? Prayer isn't about the words you say. It's about the spirit behind them. And according to Jesus, there's a way to speak to God that opens heaven, and a way that keeps the door shut. In this video, you'll discover what Jesus himself taught, not just about prayer, but about how to speak to the Creator in a way that moves mountains, heals wounds, and draws divine attention. You'll also learn the one mistake that even believers make, the mistake that causes their prayers to fall flat, unheard, unanswered. This message is not just a teaching, it's a wake-up call. Because if you've ever felt like God wasn't listening, the truth is, maybe you weren't speaking His language. Most people believe that talking to God is simple. They repeat memorized prayers, whisper words before bed, kneel, speak, and assume God is listening. But Jesus warned us, not every prayer reaches heaven, not every voice is heard, and not every soul who speaks is truly speaking to God. The mistake is subtle, but dangerous. People approach God the same way they approach the world, with rushed words, with selfish motives, with hearts full of noise but empty of reverence. They treat prayer like a transaction. I ask, you give. If you don't give, I stop asking. But Jesus showed us something radically different. In Matthew 6, He said, "When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues to be seen by others." In other words, don't pray for performance. Don't talk to God like you're talking to a crowd, because God doesn't respond to noise. He responds to truth. Many pray with fear, guilt, or pressure, thinking that longer prayers mean more power. But Jesus shattered that idea. He said, "Do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words." Length doesn't equal intimacy. Volume doesn't equal power. What God listens to is sincerity. Jesus wasn't impressed by rituals. He was moved by brokenness, by honesty, by a whisper from a humble soul who said, "I don't have the words, but I know you're there." The biggest mistake people make is thinking God only wants words. But the truth is, He wants you. Your honesty, your silence, your surrender. Even your tears can be a prayer more powerful than 1,000 memorized verses. And yet, so many keep talking without stopping to listen. Jesus didn't teach His disciples to speak louder. He taught them to go deeper. Because God is not a machine. He's not impressed by recitations. He's a Father who hears the voice of the heart louder than the voice of the lips. And the first step to truly talking to Him is realizing you've probably been doing all the talking. Jesus didn't just talk about prayer, He lived it. Every miracle, every movement, every moment of His mission was fueled by intimate connection with the Father. And when His disciples saw that power, they didn't ask Him how to preach or lead. They asked, "Lord, teach us to pray." Why? Because they realized prayer wasn't something Jesus did. It was the source of everything He was. And so He taught them. Not with complicated rituals, but with a pattern of pure, childlike, fearless conversation. He began with Our Father, not Almighty Ruler, not Distant Creator. He used the most intimate word, Father. This changed everything. He was showing us that God isn't just to be feared, He's to be trusted, approached, spoken to like a child speaks to a father, honestly, boldly, without masks. Then He said, "Your will be done." Prayer, according to Jesus, wasn't about getting your way. It was about aligning your heart with God's way. Most people come to God with a list of demands. Jesus came with a heart of surrender. And that's the secret. True prayer is not about control. It's about connection. Jesus also warned about praying publicly to impress others. He valued the secret place, the quiet room where no one applauds, no one watches, and only God sees. Go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Why? Because in silence, the soul becomes honest. And in honesty, God draws near. Jesus didn't need long speeches. He needed solitude. When He was tired, He prayed. When He was tempted, He prayed. When He was overwhelmed, He withdrew to pray. He showed us that prayer is less about words and more about alignment. Less about repetition and more about reverence. Less about noise and more about presence. If you want to talk to God the way Jesus did, don't just speak. Surrender. Pause. Trust. Because Jesus wasn't teaching prayer as a religious exercise. He was revealing it as the lifeline between heaven and earth. There is one mistake so common, so subtle, that most people don't even realize they're making it. It doesn't involve the words you use or the position of your hands. It's not about how long you pray or how many times you've done it. It's about your heart. The one mistake that blocks divine connection is praying without truly believing that God is listening. So many people approach prayer with doubt buried beneath their words. They speak, but their spirit is already defeated. They ask, but deep down they don't expect a real answer. They go through the motions, but their soul is disconnected. Jesus made this clear. When you pray, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. He wasn't teaching magic. He was teaching faith. Not faith in getting what you want, but faith that God hears you, knows you, and is already moving, even when you don't feel it. When your heart is filled with fear, cynicism, or spiritual apathy, your prayers become empty echoes, not because God turns away, but because you've already closed the door from the inside. It's like trying to tune into a frequency while the volume is muted. The connection is there, but you've silenced your own reception. The mistake isn't doubt, it's unwillingness to trust. Jesus never said your faith had to be perfect. He said it had to be present. Even faith as small as a mustard seed could move a mountain, but it had to be real. The enemy wants you to think prayer doesn't work, wants you to feel like God is silent. Because if you stop believing He's near, you stop talking. And if you stop talking, your connection fades. But Jesus gave us the antidote: ask and believe. Not in fear, not in shame, but in trust. Because the moment you speak with expectation, the moment you pray as if God is already listening, you align your soul with the truth. You are not alone. You've never been. He's been waiting for you to believe that. In a world obsessed with noise, performance, and constant speaking, Jesus taught us the secret most people miss. Silence is not empty, it's sacred. When Jesus prayed, He often withdrew into silence. Mountains, gardens, deserts. He didn't fill the space with words, He filled it with reverence. Because real prayer isn't about how much you say, it's about how fully you mean what you say. Padre Pio once said, "Prayer is the key to God's heart, but it must be dipped in reverence and silence." And this aligns with how Jesus prayed, not loudly in public but in the stillness where no one watched, but heaven listened. Reverence is more than a posture. It's an attitude of the soul. It means coming before God with awe, with awareness, with the understanding that you're speaking to the Creator of the universe, and yet He calls you His child. When you speak without reverence, prayer becomes a routine. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you let the silence speak, that's when your soul becomes honest. And that honesty, that raw, trembling truth, is where heaven responds. God isn't moved by polished words. He's moved by truth that costs something. By the prayer that starts with, "I don't even know what to say." By the tears, the stillness, the heart that simply whispers, "I'm here." Jesus prayed in Gethsemane with groans, with sweat, with silence. Not because He didn't know what to say, but because some moments require more soul than speech. Silence is where you hear God the clearest. Reverence is where your spirit aligns with His. Truth is the only language He truly responds to. If your prayers feel dry, if God feels far, don't speak more. Sit longer. Bow lower. Strip the mask. Because the prayer that changes your life usually begins in the quiet place where no one sees but God. And in that sacred silence, your soul becomes visible, and heaven draws near. If you want to speak to God the way Jesus did, you have to stop trying to impress Him and start trying to know Him. Jesus didn't come to teach us religious routines. He came to restore relationship. And in every moment He spoke to the Father, there was one thing always present: intimacy. Not formality, not fear, but deep, quiet, soul-to-soul trust. So how did Jesus talk to God? He called Him Father. He began with closeness, with belonging. He didn't beg like a stranger. He approached like a son. He also listened. Before every miracle, Jesus withdrew. He didn't rush. He aligned. Because true power doesn't come from asking more, it comes from being more in tune. He prayed with honesty, even in Gethsemane when His soul was breaking. He said, "If it's possible, take this cup from me." But then He surrendered. "Not my will, but yours be done." That's how you speak to God the way Jesus did. You begin with trust. You continue with surrender. And you end with peace, knowing that no matter what happens, you were heard. Jesus also taught us to pray with simplicity. No performance. No empty repetition. Just truth. He told us to forgive before we pray. To come with clean hands. To let go of pride, grudges, bitterness, because those things block the flow of grace. When you speak to God the way Jesus did, you don't need to sound spiritual. You don't need fancy words. You just need to be present, humble, open. Sometimes the most powerful prayer is, help me. Sometimes it's, thank you. Sometimes it's just tears. But every time, it's real. Because when you speak to God with the heart of Jesus, you don't just pray. You connect. You align. You become a vessel of heaven on earth. And from that place, miracles move, mountains shift, and even in silence, God responds. Oh, you don't need to be perfect to speak to God. You just need to be real. Prayer is not a performance. It's not a checklist. It's a moment where your soul touches eternity. Jesus didn't give us a script. He gave us access. He showed us that we can speak to the Creator of the universe, as a child speaks to their father, with honesty, with surrender, with love. So if your prayers have felt dry, you've been wondering why heaven feels silent, maybe it's time to stop performing and start simply being present. Right now, wherever you are, you can close your eyes and say one thing: Father, I'm here. And that alone is enough to move heaven. Speech balloon if this message touched your heart. Comment, Father, teach me to pray. Pushpin subscribe for more spiritual insights, hidden truths, and revelations from the life of Jesus and the saints. Red heart like this video if you're ready to talk to God the way Jesus did. Outbox tray share this with someone whose prayers might be echoing in silence, so they too can find their way back to the voice that always listens.